feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Merchant.
I'm a real boy, Matt.
Is that Pinocchio? No, I did I
think that's the Shrek version.
Like a Mickey Mouse or something like that. Yes, today we are reviewing Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio. Ironically, we are sitting in a Cineplex theater doing this.
The Scotiabank.
The Scotiabank. It is the day before TIFF. 'Twas the night before TIFF-mas.
Well, actually, it's the 6th.
Oh my God, yeah, I don't know what day it is anymore. But we're just hanging out. Our reviews and our content will sound a little different over the next couple weeks because of being right in the core of TIFF. We are recording things. Of course, this is the loudest it sounded since we sat
Just
down.
go with it, man. Just go with it.
We're just going to roll with it. So you might hear some weird noises in the background. You might hear people talking, people might interrupt us, but we are going to be recording all of our reviews and podcasts over the next 2 weeks or so, kind of on the go as we see TIFF movies, as we kind of see other movies and try to squeeze things in, like Pinocchio, like you can check out a review of Cobra Kai 5, Barbarian, see how they run, other things like that, but mostly it'll be TIFF over the next couple weeks, but that's why we sound a little different and you won't be able to see our faces. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Eric, how are you doing?
You know what? I'm good. I think another thing, I'm sure you already mentioned it, but I just kind of blacked out there as you were talking because I don't like to listen. As we're talking about Pinocchio specifically, when it comes to technical issues, we don't have a pop filter. So when we're saying certain words
especially
or phrases,
Pinocchio.
Exactly, that might become a bit of an issue. But you're not paying for this content; it's free.
We don't charge any of you guys.
Yeah, and we never would.
But I kind of like this vibe that we do once in a while because it just kind of gives it a different flavor, even though we're talking about Pinocchio right now.
We're hanging out with the boys.
Our TIFF content from a couple years ago, we did this as well. And I think it gives it a different vibe. We were planned on doing a whole bunch of pre-recording, but our day kind of went to crap yesterday when we were trying to get TIFF tickets. You guys can hear about that on the 131st episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. But today, Pinocchio, I don't even think we really need to explain what this is.
No.
Because it's Pinocchio.
It's a quote-unquote live-action remake of Disney's version of Pinocchio, starring Tom Hanks as Geppetto, directed by Robert Zemeckis. And
Joseph Gordon-Levitt with an accent, of course.
Yes, it's Jiminy Cricket.
You got all those Robert Zemeckis highlights from the last 20 years of him going.
A lot of uncanny valley, bad CGI, questionable stereotypes in terms of characters and designs.
I think that happens when you don't update, a movie that came out in 1940, 41. When did Pinocchio come out?
It's interesting. Pinocchio is one of those movies where I feel it has, again, it's been a long time since I've seen the Disney version of Pinocchio.
Since I was a kid, I think, yeah.
So, but it's not like Peter Pan or The Aristocrats where there are things that stick out like a sore thumb when it comes to, racist stereotypes and gender stereotypes. And as a kid, Pinocchio is kind of like one of the first animated films that you watch that's kind of a more morality tale for children, right? Learning to be brave, honest, and loyal, and having a conscience and learning what that is, for the first time, or at least having an idea of what that is. And with this version, a lot of that, even though it's kind of skimmed through in an almost Cole's Notes way, as the Coca-Cola machine
it's flooding.
It's flooding, it makes sense for Pinocchio if it was going to do it for any film. We'll get to that in a second. But it's one of those movies where you watch it as a child and you start to learn about these kind of, these sort of meta concepts, but also the idea of just growing up and being a better person. As I'm trying to be serious and this friggin' Coke machine is going on. But, I think it's almost fitting in a way. Like you mentioned, there's one sequence where Pinocchio goes to Pleasure Island.
Pleasure Island, what a name.
Yeah, and ends up drinking some root beer, which also is kind of weird because wouldn't he, the wood that rot after a while.
I don't think, throw logic out the window.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any, like, it's not, even though it's live action, it's not meant to be the real world, obviously, which is like never their intention. But I think that goes to some of the issues I had with the movie, because I think going into this, you kind of know what you're going to get, right? Like, we've got enough of these Disney kind of live action remakes that I feel like at this point, I think expectations are what they are. You kind of know that it'll be almost a shot-for-shot remake with a couple real humans and some updated animated sequences based on, like, you know, a big chunk of characters, even in Pinocchio, are animated characters, even in this movie, right? So it's like they're all kind of these weird live action, you know, animated hybrid movies. So it's weird even calling them live action. But I think, like, I don't know, like, it's not that I was even disappointed with this movie. I guess when you have Robert Zemeckis and you have Tom Hanks, and, like, you know, Zemeckis hasn't necessarily made a good movie since Castaway, but it's just like, there's not super high expectations, but he's still the guy who directed, you know, Back to the Future, and, like, he's
Who Framed
like,
Roger Rabbit, won the Oscar for directing for Forrest Gump, which was his first collaboration with Tom Hanks.
Thank God that stopped.
And like, you're watching this movie, and you know, there are the expectations of, we've gotten a lot of these already, and the debate of whether or not they are live action has always kind of been a consistent sort of criticism.
Depends on what the movie is. But
right. But the thing is, with this movie in particular, and being from somebody who you would expect a little bit more, this movie is passionless. Like, there's no real rhyme or reason, even though there is a lot of rhyme and reason in the film itself, for this movie to exist, on top of the fact that it seems like Robert Zemeckis is just on autopilot. Like, there's nothing in this that
everyone feels kind of autopilot on this, right?
Yeah, but I mean, for a filmmaker, it's like you are literally spending
years of your
life
life
on something that, you know, you have to find some value or interest in that amount of time that you're working on that. And it's like, well, the technology isn't on the same scale or page as even some of his motion capture stuff, like the Polar Express or Beowulf, and those aren't great either, but
and they're of their time.
But at least there's kind of like, okay, he was an early adopter of that technology, right? Where this kind of just feels like he is really phoning it in.
There's some dodgy CG, and I think that comes with the water, a lot of bad green screen. The actual characters look fine, but, like,
except Jiminy Cricket, who looks like a Bug's Life reject model.
And even Pinocchio, like, making him look so much like the animated version. It is that weird suspension of disbelief where obviously this isn't the real world that they're living in. There's talking foxes and
Honest John.
And stuff like that, but you'd think Geppetto, he's, like, basing Pinocchio off of his son that died, right?
Yeah.
That, like, he's like, oh, I think he looks like him. I'm like, no, he looks like a cartoon character.
He looks like the animated Disney's version of Pinocchio.
Yeah, which I'm like, wouldn't he, in a live action version, try to make him look a little bit more realistic? But they take this cartoon look to it, and I know we'll probably get that in the Guillermo del Toro one that's coming out later,
Well, I've got three words for you: Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Yeah,
Do you remember that Pinocchio version?
No, I don't.
So there's a live action version of Pinocchio in the 90s with Jonathan Taylor Thomas and Martin Landau as Geppetto.
Okay.
And that version of Pinocchio is supposed
horrifying,
to look,
or what?
It is. And unintentionally.
Even this version looks horrifying at times with his, like, dead eyes and stuff. But, like, I agree with you. Like, the CG is dodgy, which I think that just comes from the Disney Plus budget too, right? And, like, all the things we've heard about working with, you know, effects houses and stuff like that. Like, they just don't get enough time to work on these movies and make them look how they should. And then when it's just the same movie, I think it works a little better in animated, or you forgive things a little bit more in an animated film, right? Because, like, I feel like in this, everything feels so rushed, so, like, okay, Pinocchio's created, Pinocchio's now going to school for some reason, Pinocchio's now going with the hooligans to Pleasure Island, and, like, it's just like...
He's in a whale.
And I get, like, all of that just feels like it happens with no rhyme or reason, and it's not like I get it. It's a Disney movie about a puppet that comes to life. Like, I don't necessarily need that, but, like, it just weirdly, when it's in live action and it's the same movie as the animated one, which was groundbreaking at the time in 1940, it's like you're not doing anything groundbreaking, right? Like, the best Disney live action remakes are something that are at least trying to do something different, or at least trying to change something, or even playing with tech. Like, the Lion King movie, Jon Favreau's Lion King, is literally a shot-for-shot remake, basically, right?
Yeah.
But at least he's playing with some new tech and trying to do something new, sort of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that movie is also awful. I would say, like, the exceptions of the rule, and I was talking to actually a friend of ours, a colleague of ours, Stephen Ellison, this morning about it, and this always comes up again, because there's always an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And the ones that kind of are those exceptions are usually Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella,
yeah.
and then, you know, David Lowery's Pete's Dragon,
yep.
because those movies felt like the directors either had an interesting angle or were actually invested
inspired
passionately
and going, okay, let's take the source material, make something.
Getting emotional there?
Excuse me. It's the pumpkin spice.
It's the root beer.
Yeah, and then making something original. I get what you're saying, but then my defense of The Lion King is, like, at least from a technical side of things, you're trying something that hasn't necessarily totally been done. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I guess, but at the same time, like, it does still feel like an exercise.
Oh, totally.
But that would make more sense if Robert Zemeckis directed The Lion King.
I know, right?
Because with this, like, it just feels like it was like a weekend gig for him or something like that. Like, I get a lot of this, like, even though, you know, the uncanny valley of it all has dated the Polar Express and Beowulf, at least with those films, you can understand why he was trying to make adaptations of those stories with that technology as it was starting to burgeon and again, like, be an early adopter. And he's not, like, you know, say what you will about James Cameron. Like, James Cameron continues to push the medium when it comes to motion capture. And, like, you can tell that he is completely pot committed in making those Avatar movies. Zemeckis to me kind of feels just like this wandering guy that, in the same way that, like, when George Lucas was making the Star Wars prequels, it's like the tech was good enough where he could kind of be lazy and not have to worry about, you know, shooting everything perfectly, you know, in camera and fix it in post.
Fix it in post,
like there's nothing in this movie that I would say it's like, oh, well, like, there's that Zemeckis touch, other than the one puppeteer has the brace that reminded me of the braces that Forrest Gump wears at the beginning, and
even
like the
Alvin
whimsical
Silvestri's
nature.
Score and stuff is very uninspired, right? Like, you put it perfectly when I was texting you after, where it was just like lazy and uninspired, and I would lean on the uninspired part, which then leads into the laziness part, where it's just like, it doesn't seem like anyone was like, oh shit, I love Pinocchio, we got to do our own version of this. It was, Disney has a streaming platform now. They need hashtag content for it.
We haven't done Pinocchio yet.
We haven't done Pinocchio. It's one of the ones we haven't done. It was, you know, it is an important movie, an animated movie from their early days. And
it still is. I mean, it still carries weight even now. Like, I think the best live action adaptation of Pinocchio, and even though, you know, it came out around the same time as Castaway, and I think it's kind of been reappraised in the last 20 years, is Steven Spielberg's AI, which is Pinocchio, with you know, with Haley Joel Osment's character wanting to be a real boy, and even at the end finding the blue fairy and like where that goes. And, you know, a lot of people kind of are dismissive of it because of it being a Kubrick script, right? And kind of thinking like Spielberg maybe made it too sentimental, but apparently Kubrick's version was more sentimental than Spielberg's final cut of that film. But you look at that movie and you're like, okay, that's a film that kind of takes that original fairy tale inspiration and does something really interesting with it. And then, you know,
something different, right?
Yeah, and then, you know, I joked about the Jonathan Taylor Thomas one, but it is interesting where, like, in the 90s, you got a bunch of movies like that one. You got a film called Pinocchio's Revenge, which was about a slasher Pinocchio doll that was kind of more on the tail end of, like, the fascination with slasher dolls after Chucky. But yeah, with this, it's just like you're watching it and you're just kind of feeling like nobody's interested in this. One of the most beautiful songs ever, you know, Wish Upon a Star, is sung by Cynthia Erivo, who plays the Blue Fairy in this. And while she has an amazing voice, and like there is that one moment where it kind of feels like, oh, like that, like it, like that, that was lovely.
Iconic Disney song too. They've used it for their intro for the last God knows how long.
Yeah, but when she kind of like leaves the picture, it's almost comically bad the way she does, and it kind of like even that one moment is kind of ruined. Or when you have the corporate synergy of the cuckoo clocks going off, and then you're seeing all the brand name Disney characters like Woody and, you know, Jessica and Roger Rabbit and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White in the cuckoo clocks. It's just kind of like it reeks of product.
That doesn't bother me as much because, like, I don't think it's like I don't know, like that. I understand. It doesn't make any sense, but that shit doesn't bother me.
I think it's a bad in joke. Like, I just think it's like, hey, look, it's like, this is a Disney movie, and like, you know,
it's just an Easter egg,
Woody's in this film, and you know, the
know.
guy
To
who
me, that's just
directed
like
Who Framed Roger Rabbit directed this.
To me, that's a harmless Easter egg. Like, that doesn't bother me, but like, more than some of the more, you know, actual things about the movie. But I'm more indifferent than anything. Like, it's not that I even thought it was awful. It's just like, I think I know what to expect now watching these, and like, I'm never super excited for a new Disney live action remake. Again, like David Lowery doing Peter Pan and Wendy coming up next year. Is it this year or next year?
I think it's next year.
Yeah. I am interested in that because of Pete's Dragon, and David Lowery is a guy who won't just do a shot-for-shot remake of Peter Pan.
Yeah, and saying something like he even was quoted saying that his version is more inspired by The Revenant than it is Peter Pan.
Which is like cool. Like, if you're gonna bring interesting people in and do something at least slightly different, like, or modernize it. Like, couldn't you, like Pinocchio in 1940? Like you said, it's a cautionary tale for children and you know, falling in with the wrong crowds and doing things and that you're not supposed to and stuff like that. Couldn't you have modernized that a little bit? And I don't know if that would be kind of off-putting or weird to have Robert Zemeckis like update it to what like kids should be worried about nowadays, or what parents are worried about.
Especially if it is someone like Robert Zemeckis who might be a little bit out of touch when it comes to that stuff. That's what I mean, right? But maybe he's not the best choice if you're going to do something different. Like, but even the stuff that's in, like, that's iconic in that original film, like, you know, Pinocchio telling a lie and his nose growing, like, it's so impactful in that original movie, and in this, it's just kind of like, you know, a way to get to the next scene. Like, it doesn't really have any substantial meaning or heft to it. Yeah,
that's true.
You know?
And it's just that one moment, and you forget it's such an iconic thing about Pinocchio, right? And it's
the only way this movie works is if you probably haven't seen it. Like, if you're a kid growing up now and you've never seen Pinocchio, and maybe this is the first time you've watched it, maybe it works a little bit better for you. But
and I think that's what most of these live action remakes are for, right? Yeah. Is like, you talked about lazy. It's like either lazy parents or lazy kids or whoever that don't want to watch the original, which weirdly, all those Disney animated movies, the animation holds up wonderfully. Like in 1080p or 4K, depending on what they've updated them from. They were, you know, put onto film, and they all have this really nice look to them. And like you said, the stories are still there. They're still important. They're still relevant.
Yeah.
And they're still there for you to watch. They're all on Disney Plus. They're not in the vault anymore. They're not like hard to find or any like thing. It's just like, just watch the originals. That's like,
people are afraid of old things.
I know,
you
right? Yeah, it's weird. They see 1940 and it sounds a little old, and it's in 4:3 or whatever, I think, or maybe Academy aspect ratio, that, which is 4:3, right? Is Pinocchio in 4:3 or is it?
I thought it was.
It might be like full screen.
Full screen.
Yeah. It might be. I forget. It's been a long ass time. So
yeah.
I don't know, man. Yeah, it's just for people. I guess it's for those people that wouldn't necessarily go, let's watch Pinocchio with the kids now because it's so old, that you just go, let's watch Pinocchio because it's new.
Yeah.
And it's
Tom Hanks is in Pinocchio. Because like even a lot of people don't even know who Robert Zemeckis is.
No,
you know?
That's a very, we'll talk about Zemeckis and the other movies that he's made. Although that is something you put in the trailer from the director of Forrest Gump.
Right. But you still don't know maybe the name of it. But you do know, okay, well, from the director of Forrest Gump starred Tom Hanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're not going to necessarily, although it would have been better if they put from the director of Castaway, because of the island stuff in Pinocchio, thematically speaking. Like, that's the only stuff that maybe also works. And like, even the padding in this movie, like, you can tell where like they've added new musical numbers and songs.
None of them are memorable.
And Pinocchio's weird relationship with this marionette doll that's not real, that kind of it doesn't
go anywhere, and
it's a weird delusional thing. Like, it's bizarre in that way, but it's not interesting enough. And I think why I really don't like it is because even though Zemeckis hasn't made a good movie for 2 decades now,
20 some years. When was Castaway?
Castaway was 2000, 2001. It was the same year that Gladiator came out.
Over 20 years, yeah.
Yeah.
In our opinion.
Yeah. I still expect more from him.
I do too, man.
Because he is a better filmmaker. Like, I would love to see him go back, and he will never do it, but to go back to making a movie like Used Cars or I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah.
But he's like George Lucas, where he's become so complacent in, the technology, and he doesn't have to do much. And the crap that he's been releasing in the last little while reflects a man who doesn't have the same spark that he did when he was making,
30 years
Romancing
ago,
the
yeah.
Stone,
40 years ago.
or breaking, new ground with even stuff that's amazing, like Back to the Future, which is, for a lot of people, including myself, like a quintessential, coming of age, Amblin movie,
An iconic movie,
Yeah.
franchise, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's disappointing. Not even. Yeah, it's
It is
disappointing because of him. I think, right?
But it's also what you would expect one of these movies to be, and it just kind of feels like, it's a way to advertise Disney Plus, and it's also a way to advertise that, we have both the original and this new version on our catalog. And I know that sounds cynical, but there is a cynical quality to
a lot of these live
being
action.
a corporate product than it is an actual
movie
contemplation of morality.
Yeah.
Because
we already got that in the first
Yeah.
movie, and then you're just regurgitating it for this, right?
And Robert Zemeckis seems to have this thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where he's like, you got to have an accent.
Yeah, I don't get it, man. It's been, God, since. When did their collaboration start?
Wasn't it The Walk?
Wasn't it The Walk?
Yeah,
And
with
then
the French
just
accent.
everything since then.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, do a different accent and be in my movie. So, it's not good, but it's like I don't know. Like, I think it is what it is, and it's exactly kind of what I expected it to be. So that's not a positive either. But I'm gonna give it a 2.5 just because it's not good. But I also am like, I think it's pretty much what it always was going to be.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 1.5.
Whoa, that's low for Eric.
The half star is for Tom Hanks not doing an offensive Italian House of Gucci accent.
Yeah, which everyone else in the movie does do.
He's just kind of old and gruff. And again, it shows you how much, Tom Hanks is such a likable guy, given the terrible performances he's given this year in both Pinocchio and Elvis, and delivering a son named Chet.
Yeah.
So, kudos to him for at least kind of just being more cantankerous than anything else.
Yeah. All right, that wraps this one, everyone.
That's the other quick thing I want to say. He has more chemistry with Wilson in Castaway than he does with Pinocchio.
Yeah, he's barely in it. He's at the beginning and the end.
But Geppetto's
right?
not in a lot of it anyways.
Which is fine. Thank you all for listening to this one, or you might have watched on YouTube if I just saw, photos of Eric and I, so you're welcome again. Please check out all of our TIFF reviews over on Untitled Movie Reviews on podcast services and on YouTube. We have a Cobra Kai 5 review out that you guys should check out. We'll have probably 30 plus reviews over the next
As it gets louder.
As it gets louder with a whole, it seems like classroom of children just came in. One-stop shop for everything. Go over to Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. Yeah, we'll have tons and tons of stuff over the next couple weeks. So keep it locked right here. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, including UntitledMoviePodcast.com and on Family Feud Canada starting this Monday, probably September 12th, I think, on CBC and CBC Gem. Monday to Thursdays, 7:30, I want to say, or 7. That shows you how much I know. And at Matt Rohrbeck on all those social medias.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on RogersTV.com/CinemaScene and on the social medias at EM6211. And I also want to quickly mention that Matt and I did a TIFF pre-show.
Why is everyone screaming?
With Dave Voigt on over
Seats.
at In the Seats. So check that out as well.
All right, until next time.
I want to be a real boy.
Real boy.